What is up? UFC 327 goes down tomorrow. I'm going to go over every fight on the card that I care about, tell you who I am picking and why, give you any notes that I found while I was watching tape for this card so you can come to your own conclusions as well, and give you any betting analysis that I have and recommendations, throw in a little parlay at the end if you stick around for that. So without any further ado, the first fight that I actually care about on this card is going to be Patricio Pitbull versus Aaron Pico. At the top here, you'll be able to see each fighter's record. You'll see their record in their top five. Pitbull coming off of a win versus Dan Ige. Pico a loss to Lerone Murphy. I've got both fighters' UFC records. I have their height and their reach. I've classified something of a fight style for every fighter, though in MMA, obviously, that's never going to be perfect. I have how many knockdowns each fighter averages over the course of 15 minutes, but on this particular matchup, not a ton of data, as there's 3 combined UFC fights between these two gentlemen. Then I'll also have their record by each method of finish and, of course, decision. In parentheses, you will see their specifically UFC record by this method. So since Pico is 0-1 in the UFC, and that one loss came by KO to Lerone Murphy, you will see that indicated there. And the last stat that I have listed there is going to be the strike ratio. That's how many strikes each of these guys land versus absorb. And again, for this particular matchup, the low data will mean that it is a little bit harder for us to get an accurate read on this, especially in the case of Pico, because at least for Pitbull, both of his fights went the distance. So we have seen 30 minutes of him in the octagon. We've seen like 3 minutes of Aaron Pico to this point. So in this matchup, I think it was probably the most shocking one to me on the card, because I expected this to be maybe a coin flip or for Pitbull to be the favorite. But instead, he earlier this week was almost a 3-1 underdog. I think I bet him at like plus 270. A little bit of a spoiler where we're going with this. But now I think he's fallen to like plus 225. Regardless, the odds makers think that Pico is definitely going to win this. And I can't say that I don't understand where they're coming from with that. Obviously, the higher output is going to come from Pico. You don't have to look at the stats to tell you that. You guys have seen some tape from these guys at least, and you know Pico is going to be throwing more punches. The only problem is that Pitbull is difficult to put out. I really have a hard time seeing, and obviously he's been finished by knockout before. It's not like it's impossible for that to happen. But Yair landed bombs on him. Yair landed great kicks. He landed over and over again on him, and he was not able to get Pitbull out of there over the course of 15 minutes. And even in the Dan Ige fight where he won, Pitbull ate a head kick where he was shooting a takedown, and it just full on connected knee to chin. And I guarantee you, if that lands on Pico, he's going out. Like, I don't have to see that occur to know that that shot puts Pico out, which kind of tells you all you need to know about the problems that Aaron Pico faces in this matchup. It's similar to another fight that we will talk about later on in this card, and that is why I was also so perplexed to earlier this week find Patricio Pitbull by knockout at like plus 750. It's fallen down to plus 550 now on DraftKings, so you can still get a ton of value, I think, by that, especially considering that that is the primary losing condition of Aaron Pico. I know that Pitbull has not won a UFC fight by knockout. Trust me, I understand that. However, I don't think he's facing a UFC caliber opponent. Aaron Pico is great. He's got incredible boxing combinations. We'll break down the Aaron Pico tape in a little bit, but his chin is a massive problem against anybody. And while I'm sure this, some people aren't going to think that this is aged as well because of Milk Costa's recent knockout win over Dan Ige, but that was, number one, a disgusting kick from Milk Costa, number two, a finish from a surging Milk Costa who's been finishing most of his opponents, and number three, Dan Ige's first finish loss. But this is all a tangent to say that I do think Pitbull putting power on Dan Ige significantly enough to drop him in their fight does spell trouble for Aaron Pico in this matchup. But that's going to be kind of my quick breakdown on it. Let's get into some more tape. We'll start with Pitbull. And my God, this guy's output, at least in his UFC career, has been abysmal. I didn't get too deep into his Bellator tape, but I understand from the fights that I have watched previously, though not recently, that this wasn't always the case to the extent that it is, but it is certainly what the Pitbull UFC experience looks like. I will say, in the second round of that Dan Ige fight, when he did crack Dan, he poured it on him. He started ripping combinations against the cage and really did not want to let Dan out of there. Dan Ige, like I said, had never been finished before. He fought Costa, so he's not an easy guy by any means to finish, but I felt like compared to what we've seen in the other stints so far in Pitbull's career, that particular exchange did highlight that while he's very reserved and while that output is remarkably low, he still can hurt you, and if he does possess the urgency to look for a fight-ending sequence, and that's even if a fight-ending sequence is possible, or rather necessary against Aaron Pico. I know it's possible, but if it's necessary, because he really could land one bomb on Pico and just send him out of orbit and never see him again. I do also believe that as far as the grappling goes, some people are probably expecting Pico to hold a bigger advantage there than he does. Pitbull has a very sophisticated grappling game. He is good at getting up off of the bottom. He is good at submission grappling. He is opportunistic and very elite with his takedown timing, I would say. And it's not really something I see either guy getting a ton of advantage of out of this fight. I think that both would be wise to try, but I would be surprised if I saw either guy racking up serious top time and more than maybe 2 or 3 completed takedowns by the time this fight is all said and done. And while I would give Pitbull the advantage in terms of his defense, he has a tight high guard even when at kicking range a lot of the time, he does seem to get caught by head kicks a lot. I think it's him slipping, as well as the fact that sometimes he can get lazy with those hands. Sometimes if he's slowing in a fight, then you can time his shots, and Dan Ige was able to do that and honestly should have put Pitbull out, but his chin is made out of concrete. So there's that to be considerate of. If Pico looks to throw up a head kick and he's crafty with the setup, I think there's a really high chance he lands it, because we were able to see in different scenarios both Yair and Dan Ige land kicks to the head on Pitbull. But even if that was to happen, we've seen Pitbull eat those shots. So that's what separates him and Pico, is that if something big lands on Pitbull and I have him in my parlay or I have a Pitbull ticket, I'm not going to be shitting my pants. I'm still going to be concerned, obviously, because Aaron Pico is an offensive pressure that is very difficult for a lot of fighters to deal with. But if Pitbull lands something big on Pico and I have him in my parlay, I'm tearing up the slip because Pico's laying on the ground. And the problem is that I don't want to bet that at some point within 15 minutes, because I don't see Pico finishing Pitbull, that he is going to find that knockout. I don't want to bet that he's not going to. He might be low volume, but he does find good counters. He does time his counters well. He does select them and place them well accuracy-wise, to the point that I 100% see him landing on Pico, and I 100% see him landing big enough on Pico to get the finish. Let's move over to Pico tape study. So, obviously, if you've seen Pico box, It's clear he's been boxing his entire life. His combos are nasty. He can chain his low kicks into his boxing. His offensive pressure and his footwork are immaculate. His ability to get somebody backed up into the cage and just tear to the body, tear upstairs afterwards, just incredible. Combo that with his wrestling. He's an offensive force to be reckoned with. But his chin is literally sawdust. It's one step away from getting obliterated at any point in time in the fight. It's 1 HP as soon as the fight gets started. And to make matters worse, his defense is as porous as a sponge. I would honestly say that Jiri does a better job blocking his head most of the time, which is not a good thing for me to be saying about a fighter in the featherweight division, where the skill level is as much higher as it is there than it is in light heavyweight. And ultimately, I don't really need to spend all that much time on the Pico tape study, because Patricio Pitbull already did. Stone hands, glass chin. He already said it. That's true as day when you watch the tape back, because he can absolutely fucking destroy you with his hands, but he can also get obliterated by like just a random shot that was a throwaway that wouldn't do anything to a lot of other guys. So all of that leads my pick to have to be Patricio Pitbull by round 1 KO. I will say, if you are on the Pico side, I probably see him winning a decision here. It's only plus 185 for that, but compared to the plus 150 they're giving you for KO, when I don't think that that's a super likely method for him to win this fight by, I would probably take that decision prop there. But the numbers for Pitbull are much better. Plus 650 by decision, plus 550 by knockout. And they're that much better, while I was going to confidently pick him whether he was the underdog or the favorite. So that's what I'm doing. I think betting the under at minus 130 for 2.5 rounds, I don't hate it, but there is potential for this to just end up being a very point fighty. Pico's reluctant to engage because he just got knocked out. Pitbull's low volume as ever. And then he wins like a close decision there. So the under is dangerous still. I wouldn't necessarily be like anchoring around it or anything like that. But the number is nice enough where, you know, if you aren't confident one way or another, you're not sure whether you think Pitbull or Pico is going to get the finish, you can kind of go that route. Plus 100 to bet the fight ending by knockout, I don't hate either. Don't love it, but I don't hate it either. Moving on from here, we have the next matchup on the card. Opening up the main card is going to be Cub Swanson in his retirement fight, taking on Nate the Train Landwehr. And this is just going to be an action fight through and through. That's what this is promising for sure. And that's why we're all here for it. So this is going to be one where you make sure you're in your seat, because no matter what happens here, it's going to be violent for sure. It is going to be a fight where somebody is likely to get very hurt, whether that's Cub or whether that's Nate. Time will tell. I have an inkling one way or the other, but you'll get to hear that in a second. So you'll see neither of these guys land a ton of knockdowns, but I will say that Nate has been getting knocked down and hurt more often in his recent few fights. And that is a problem, because even though Cub Swanson is on the older side of things here, and this is going to be his last fight, he looked incredible last time out against Billy Quarantillo. He was, let's just jump over to Cub Swanson tape study. He was showing off the basics that make his game work so well. His vision makes it to where he's able to keep his hands low a lot of the time, because he's able to see if a kick is coming up or what punches are coming and properly respond, whether that's slipping or getting the hands up for them. His timing is incredible, which means that he's able to leap in and out of pocket and catch opponents when they don't expect him to. He's also able to just attack on that half beat when fighters are resetting and they don't expect him to attack. His shot selection in those moments is also great, mixing up with uppercuts, oblique kicks, straight punches, hooks, mixing in his jab to set all of these different things up. He's just a very elite and well-rounded striker, and it's very obvious while watching his game how seasoned of a fighter he is. And he's very good at range management. I mentioned that he likes to kind of get in and out of that pocket. He's like if MVP was fun to watch against elite competition, that's what Cub Swanson in 2026 is like. Well, I guess I should say in 2024, because we haven't seen him in 2026. But unless he's taken a severe step back, that's going to be kind of the fight style you'll see from him. The only concern that I have for him is that Nate the Train does have power. He does love to scrap. He's willing to take one to give one. And if Cub's reflexes or vision are fading at all, or if he's got some ring rust for a year out, we have seen Nate more recently than we have seen Cub, then that could definitely be a problem. Because like I said, he likes to keep his hands low, especially if there's a grappling threat, so that he's able to establish an underhook or down block. But that does also mean that if you are able to catch him because you're too fast or because he did not properly see whatever strike you were setting up, could be problems for sure, because the hands may not be where they are supposed to be. But let's look at Nate the Train. Unfortunately, I don't have as much fun and nice things to say about Nate the Train in his game as I would have. This breakdown was happening a few years ago, because as the first thing says there, I'm really concerned about Nate the Train's chin. He's also, as you were able to see when he fought Doo-Ho Choi, giving up much more top time than he used to in his fights, not nearly as scrambly. And because of that, and because he's vulnerable to scar tissue being open, he just wears a ton of damage in these fights. You're able to get him down, put him in bad spots, make him expend a bunch of energy trying to get back up to the feet, and inflict a ton of damage while you do. That, coupled with the chin being gone, coupled with the nature of his game, which, as compared to what I was just describing, where Cub wants to jump into the pocket when you don't expect him to be there, catch you with the 1-2, jump out, land an oblique kick while you're still in kickboxing range and circle out, not really allowing you much time to find him and exchange with him. Nate has built his UFC tenure off of being willing to take a shot to give a shot, which, as you age up, that game ages like Joel Embiid's game, which is to say not very well. And I can't see this matchup going well for him. I think Cub still has too much left in the tank, even in this being his last fight. And I can't put my money on Nate Landwehr not getting caught by something large at some point during this fight. And that's why my pick has to be Cub Swanson. I don't think he's going to get Nate out of there incredibly early. But I do think that the damage will build up, that this will be a fun fight while it lasts, that Nate will be in there. He will give Cub some shots of his own. But that the damage, the footwork, the expended energy that Nate is going to have while he's swinging at air trying to find Cub Swanson in a lot of these exchanges is just going to add up. And by the time round 3 rolls around, Cub is going to be playing with his food, and he will be able to get Nate the Train out of there. So I do like this fight not going the distance. I could see it go the distance. Nate the Train, he loves to scrap, but I think that chin's on the way out. So I'm backing Cub Swanson. I'm pretty confident that he's going to get the job done and ride off into the sunset in his retirement fight here. But moving on up the card, we got Dominic Reyes facing Johnny Walker. Got to be a tough one for Dominic Reyes here, though. He's dealing with it really well, because if he would have beat Ulberg in that fight, then undeniably probably would have been him facing off with Jiri in this main event. But that's not what happened. Now he's fighting Johnny Walker, and you can kind of see some of the stats here for this matchup. Both guys have been around the UFC light heavyweight division for a while, about the same amount of time as each other, so interesting that they have not fought yet. Both guys land more than they absorb, so positive strike differentials there. Both guys with a high knockdown average, a little bit higher for Dom Reyes, of course. And the frame advantage for Johnny Walker will be interesting, considering the problems that Dom has had in the past when he does try to rush in on someone. Somebody with a big reach that is giving him problems could frustrate him, get him to run into the pocket. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves on this quick little breakdown. Let's get into the tape. With Reyes, I gotta say, I think that Ulberg fight was sort of an anomalous jump back to the form that he was in on that losing streak. Because he talked about it in an interview, and if you've listened to this interview and then you watch his fights on that losing streak and the Ulberg fight, what he's saying makes total sense, and it makes those fights make way more sense, especially the Ryan Spann one. He explained that he sort of has this like fear in those fights where he has those poor performances of that knockout coming, because he didn't look bad when he fought Jan, and he didn't look bad when he fought Jiri either. Like, he was putting on a good performance against both of those guys. But it's something when it wants to get the fight over with, because he's like anxious of getting caught, that he rushes his process and doesn't let the fight occur naturally. He's not, honestly, like, obviously he's chinny enough to be on the losing streak that he was on, but he's not just ridiculously chinny. Like, Dustin Jacoby was able to put out Vitor Petrino, and he landed an incredible counter on Dom and was not able to get Dom out of there. Dom was able to stay within himself, get the counter that he needed to get off in that moment, stay in the fight, and eventually finish it from that very same sequence. And that's the same Reyes at the end of the day, who got clipped by Ulberg running in like a spaz. It's just a difference of mentality at the end of the day. Like, I really think he could have done a much better job in that fight. Probably still would have lost a decision, but it seems like he reverted back to old form. And I think that there's reasons to be hopeful if you're a Reyes fan, just based on his outlook leading up to this fight. Because you want him to be in that winning streak form, Reyes, where he's calm, he's confident, he's within himself. And that's what it seems like we got in the press conference and in the media day in general. The other big thing that helps Dominic is that most of the problems that he faces are in boxing range, with being caught with a big punch, whether that is advancing unsafely or being in the pocket too long. But against Johnny Walker, we'll talk about it more here in a second when we talk about his tape, but his boxing is not it at all. And I think that makes it a lot less scary of a matchup for Reyes if he's looking at this holistically, where he doesn't really have to rush things, and he doesn't have to be super scared of getting flash KO'd. Because while Walker has power in his hands, his technique is fucking horrible. And the only thing that he has going for him in the striking is that his kicking game is pretty solid. But it's not like we've seen Reyes get, like, head kick KO'd over and over again or something like that. It's with the hands that he's getting knocked out in these fights. So let's move on to Johnny Walker's tape. Obviously, he invented pulling full mount against Zhang Minyang. Came out, pulled full mount as soon as the fight started. And pulling full mount is the best base for MMA, because he was able to stop the surging Zhang Minyang by just pulling full mount on him and tiring him out by letting him beat him up from full mount. So pretty sick stuff. But he did also show off some other great techniques in that Zhang Minyang fight. He's worked a lot on his footwork to avoid fight-ending sequences. He was circling away from the power really well of Zhang Minyang. Zhang was finding him with the lead hook as a consequence of that. And I do wonder what Dom's right hook and the power that he has in his left hand is going to do for that footwork of Walker. Because if he gets Johnny moving backwards, then he's going to be walking into the right hook, or he's going to be circling into the left hand. And both of those shots for Reyes are really good punches from him. I'm curious how Johnny will elect to circle if he is on the back foot for significant portions of this fight. And if he's not on the back foot, then that might even be worse for him, because when he's boxing on the front foot, there are so many openings. It is going to be very, very easy, I think, for Dom Reyes to find the way through the chaos of Johnny Walker, which has diminished significantly, if we're being honest, from prime Johnny Walker. He's not nearly as wild and unorthodox as he maybe once was, and there's much more tape against him against elite opponents, which kind of helps you figure out those patterns, because you're going to be funneled into the same sort of circumstances and sequences against elite competition much more often than you are cans on the regional scene, who you can kind of just batter and enforce your game on. That being said, once he has you hurt, this dude is effective with his frame. Whether it's that Paul Craig finish, where even though he's in on the single, he's able to just effectively line up those shots. Whether it's the Zhang Min Yang finish, you name it. When Johnny Walker has you hurt, you are genuinely in a fuck ton of trouble. Like, it is a problem for you at that point. And he is dangerous with his calf kicks. But it is worth noting, of course, that this is a southpaw versus orthodox matchup. So the traditional rear leg calf kick is not going to be there for Johnny the same way it is if he's fighting another orthodox fighter. That's a shin-on-shin low kick. I don't know if we've seen Johnny throw that many of those throughout his UFC tenure. I didn't see that many when I was watching on the tape. But we could always be surprised and see him have a really great one, or Poaton's answer is the step-up low kick, which many people prefer as well. That's how Volkanovski tends to handle it too. Just not very many proficient step-up calf kickers in the open stance matchup. It's just not as effective. You can't really avoid the telegraph as much on it, so people are more often prepared for it. And you just can't tend to get as much power into that. So because of that combination of factors, people are less likely to be planted on it, and you're not going to generate as much power. It just makes it hard to win fights off of that sort of kick, the same way you can win fights off of that rear leg kick in a closed stance matchup. But all of this breakdown is to say I do think Reyes is going to find the chin in round one. I think there's going to be some sort of wild, sloppy exchange, and that the person who is going to get the better of it is the man with the better hand speed, the man with the better combination striking, the man with the better boxing acumen, and the man with the more power in his hands, which is Dom Reyes. So at the end of the day, I have to pick Dom Reyes in this fight. It's a coin flip fight, so I think that there's a ton of value to be made from betting Dom this week. Obviously, you're going to want to bet him with your ass cheeks clenched the whole time, because it's going to be fucking terrifying, because that chin is, you know, it's the Dom Reyes chin. But I think if he stays within himself, that he can definitely win this fight, and that he should be expected to win this fight. And I wish I could just spend the rest of this video breaking down Dom Reyes versus Johnny Walker, but unfortunately we have to move on to Curtis Razor Blaydes taking on the incredible Hulk. Wow. This has been a media week from Josh Hokit, to say the least. What jumps off the picture here to me is the frame disadvantage Hokit brings into this fight. Nearly 6.5-inch disadvantage in reach and a 3-inch height disadvantage, which only compounds that. So he's going to be punching up at the taller Blaydes, which only makes his reach disadvantage a little bit worse. And also, you have a much bigger Curtis Blaydes in terms of just strength and size. While Hokit has not appeared weak for heavyweight, that is against absolute fucking cans. Nobody the likes of Curtis Blaydes. You could take all of the guys who have beat Curtis Blaydes in the UFC, put them on their worst day, and they would style on everybody Hokit has beat 110%. So that has to just be said off the top, is that the strength of schedule here is night and day. I don't even have to compare it. I don't have to talk to you about who Curtis Blaydes is fighting compared to who Josh Hokit's fighting. His last opponent was Denzel fucking Freeman. You probably don't even know who Denzel Freeman is. You probably don't even know who Josh Hokit is until he started doing all this weird shit during media week. And if you like the weird shit, that's totally okay. If that gets you going, I'm just here to talk about the fight. And I think that Curtis Blaydes is thinking about this matchup exactly the right way. Historically, I have been concerned about Curtis Blaydes because of his tendency to maybe just not trust properly what the correct route to victory is in a fight, whether that's grappling with somebody he definitely should not be looking to grapple with and wasting energy doing that, or boxing and striking with someone who he could easily grapple and destroy. But I think in the preparation of this fight week, him talking about how he feels like Hokit has no hands and does not want to be in the striking, him likening him to Jailton Almeida, while not perfect, because we have seen more striking, at least in the UFC tenure that we have seen from Josh Hokit, proportional to the amount of grappling we've seen when comparing to Almeida. You do have to again consider the level of competition, because Almeida actually does have better, more dangerous striking than Hokit when he is actually throwing strikes. It's just that Almeida is allergic to throwing strikes most of the time, and that is against elite competition that we are seeing that with Almeida as well. So the only way that we've ever seen anybody beat Curtis Blaydes is by knockout. He's never lost a submission, and he's never lost by a decision either. So unless Hokit is able to turn that trend, which we do see fighters do, and sub Blaydes, or just win minutes against him in the wrestling, I guess, he's got to knock him out, which I do not see anything on tape to suggest that he has the knockout power to do that, or that he has the striking ability to do that either. Everybody who has knocked out Curtis is a much better striker than Hokit, and as a pure grappling threat alone, I think that Jailton's grappling game in MMA is more dangerous than Hokit, with more potential for Blaydes to have fucked up, and he did not. I do also think that Rizvan Kuniev is a more dangerous opponent than Hokit as well, and Curtis was able to win that matchup as well. Guys, I'm not watching Josh Hokit blob around against Denzel fucking Freeman in the Apex to watch tape on this fucking fight. It's not gonna happen. I've seen his fights. You don't need me to go back through and review it. He's got okay cardio. He's been into the third round. I'd still say that if this fight goes long, I'd be more worried about his gas tank than I am optimistic for it if I am betting Hokit. He's just way too small for this division. You'll see somebody like Azamat Murzakanov, who we'll talk about in a second, who's able to manage a big size disparity at their chosen weight class because they are elite at something. They can grapple really well. Jailton Almeida was able to be an elite heavyweight despite giving up size to a lot of other heavyweights because he was elite at the grappling. His wrestling, super good. His submissions, super good. His control, super good. You're able to see Azamat knockout power in both hands. He's super precise, super good distance management, precise on the counter, great shot selection. He's able to manage being much smaller than a lot of his opponents because of that. Hokit doesn't have anything that makes you think that that is in the realm of possibility. I know that this was a long time ago, but he did get out-wrestled by Bo Nickel, who is now fighting at middleweight, and he's fighting at heavyweight. So it just goes to show you he doesn't have a monster frame or anything. But it was not a long time ago that he was wrestling Bo Nickel and losing that. And obviously, Bo Nickel's an incredible wrestler. There's no shame in losing a wrestling match to Bo Nickel. But it does make me very concerned on how you're going to out-wrestle in MMA Curtis Blaydes, who is much bigger than Bo Nickel, hits much harder than Bo Nickel, and is actually allowed to strike you now. And this is going to be the first real resistance that Hokit has met in his career, assuming he doesn't just knock out Curtis in the first exchange that they have. So he's going to actually, and obviously his whole career hasn't just been a perfect cakewalk to this point, but none of the guys that he's fought can actually mount the kind of resistance that Curtis Blaydes will be mounting to Josh Hokit in this fight. So that's why I have to pick Curtis Blaydes, and I'm picking him by unanimous decision. I could see him getting a finish in the second or third round as well. I expect that it could get kind of grimy as the fight goes on. I could definitely look stupid by the time this is all done if Curtis gets fluked, or if he just like makes it look super easy and just styles on Hokit in the striking and gets him out of there super early. I just don't super expect that to happen. I think Hokit is competent enough on the feet to not just get starched out cold, at least not until he starts to tire down. Blaydes starts being able to really work him to the cage consistently, starts being able to tee off on him at will. Then I could definitely see Blaydes getting the finish, but I think what I'm seeing happen is Blaydes win by decision, and dear Lord, I hope so, because I can't get another "Hey Mama" speech for a UFC media week. I can't do it, guys. I've had my fair share of Josh Hokit in the limelight, and I would very much like to see him fighting Denzel Freeman's in the Apex again. And yeah, Curtis Blaydes, if you're hearing this, Curtis Blaydes, please, Curtis Blaydes. Moving on to the co-main event. We got Azamat Murzakanov taking on Paulo Costa, moving up to light heavyweight. Does have one technical fight at light heavyweight before, but that was against Marvin Vettori. That was moved up because Paulo missed weight, so both fighters fought at light heavyweight instead. Well, sort of. Marvin was already like mid-cut and stuff, but that is Marvin's problem, not Paulo's problem. So Murzakanov is undefeated going into this matchup. He's 6-0 in the UFC, and 5 of those wins come by knockout. Only man who has seen the decision against him in the UFC is Dustin Jacoby. His frame leaves a lot to be desired for the light heavyweight division. He is a dense little man, but he does clock in at 5'10", so Paulo, even coming up from middleweight, will still be taller, but he will not harbor the same kind of reach advantage that some previous Murzakanov opponents have had and failed to weaponize against him. Murzakanov averaging much more knockdowns, almost 4 times the amount of knockdowns per fight as Paulo is to this point in his UFC career, though obviously we do have almost double the tape on Paulo in terms of just raw amount of fights, even more if you're talking about the actual length of time that these fights have gone, because Paulo has been in 5-round fights that have gone the full distance. Murzakanov never has before. And we also can see that the strike ratio here for Paulo leaves a lot to be desired. He's getting hit just about as much as he is hitting people, where you have an almost 2-to-1 discrepancy for Murzakanov. He is landing about twice as much as his opponents land on him. But I will say that's not the same in every single matchup. So let's talk about the Murzakanov tape a little bit. His footwork's really good. He does obviously have one-hit knockout ability. He is able to put you out with either hand. He saw Rakic with the jab, was able to line it up right on his chin, stepped in, and finished him with a single shot. He is credited with 3 significant strikes landing in that Rakic fight, and that is all he needed to get the job done that time. He is typically, I love how this slide got cut off. That's pretty cool. He's usually pretty technical, very sound and patient, but he will occasionally like dip his head and go for like a little tism blitz where he just throws a couple of straight punches in sequence with each other. And I think it's very open to being countered if somebody just casually slips it off to the side, pivots it, and lands a check hook over the top. It's pretty sloppy for how his work tends to look, honestly. Kind of struck me while I was watching the tape. And before finishing Rakic was having a lot of success using the open side against Murzakanov. And typically, while it's not always the case, I would say most southpaws tend to be better at weaponizing the open side than their orthodox opponent in a fight, because they are more used to fighting orthodox opponents than vice versa. And you'll see the southpaw tends to land their rear hand more. They tend to land that rear kick more. That's why a slight advantage historically goes to southpaws on win rate when facing orthodox fighters, just because they're a little bit more used to doing it. But he was not landing kicks to Rakic's body with the sort of authority that Rakic was landing kicks to his body. And while he started to check as the fight went on, Rakic was able to attack that open side leg kick as well with his rear leg and chop to Murzakanov's thigh as well. So there is 100% openings for that open side kicking game. And because Murzakanov does his best work with his hands, he's not really going to occupy that kicking lane or do work of his own in that regard. He's going to be trying to line you up for that left straight instead, or trying to land that overhand, line up the jab, pivot off with a right hook. Those sort of weapons, as opposed to weaponizing that open side kicking game, which makes sense as well with his shorter frame. But it is also something that he has to consider in a matchup with an orthodox fighter like Paulo Costa. And last thing I say before I go on, he does have a tendency to slow if fights go long. Most of his fights don't go long because he is such a proficient knockout artist. But his worst round in the Dustin Jacoby fight was easily the third, which every judge scored for Dustin Jacoby. It was his lowest output round by a significant margin. You can look at the strike numbers and see he was in the 50s versus being in like the 30s or the high 20s in that third round against Jacoby. So it's just undeniable that he's not able to keep up the same output that he does in the first and second round if the fight goes long, and his output isn't particularly high anyways. He wants to kind of keep a fight slow and exchange oriented, where he's able to make the better decision than the other guy based on the amount of experience that he has. But moving over to Paulo's tape, I don't know why, but Paulo Costa has seemed to develop over the course of his career a proficiency at fighting southpaws that he just lacks when he is in there with an orthodox fighter. I think it just comes down to what elements of his game are the best. And I would say if I was to boil it down to a single strike, it would have to be his right kick to the body, which he's able to use to not only set up right low kicks, but also set up right kicks to the head. And against orthodox fighters, that is the closed side. They're able to really effectively roll. You can just show your back to that kick and you'll be fine. You can step away from it, take a little bit of the juice off of it, and tend to be okay to catch it as well. The southpaws tend to have a much harder time dealing with Paulo Costa and his right kick. And I think, again, some of that might come down to that historical advantage that most southpaws have in the open side kicking game. When somebody like Paulo comes and aggressively attacks it, it gives people, even southpaws with a gorgeous left kick like Roman Kopylov, fits because they aren't able to time it or land it as effectively as Paulo is. I remember being shocked and appalled by how much more value Paulo was extracting from his open side kicking game than Roman Kopylov was when they fought. And maybe I'm a victim of the moment in picking him here because of that. But I still think he's going to get jabbed up and eat power shots. I'm concerned about Murzakanov gassing if this fight goes long, and Paulo's seeming nature of working incredible against southpaws. It just makes me feel so concerned in this matchup. And this one's like kind of intangible. It's like a vibes thing. But I have this thing that happens all the time where I'll have a fighter who in my head it's like it's clear that this is the person who wins, but there's like this little nagging voice that's like, well, you know, Fluffy should definitely beat Strickland, but Strickland's takedown defense is really good, and a lot of his best offense comes from jabs and teeps to the body, which Fluffy is particularly chinny to. And that doesn't seem to match up well. But I just, like, I silence that little voice. It's like, oh, the fighter I like is going to win. Fluffy's going to win. I like Murzakanov more than I like Paulo. Paulo's kind of annoying. I don't like how inactive Paulo is. I find Murzakanov much more exciting because he gets flashy knockouts. It's been almost a decade since Paulo knocked out anybody. But I just cannot shake the feeling that somehow, coming up from middleweight, Paulo is going to be able to handle Murzakanov's speed in a way that other light heavyweights are not. I have a feeling Paulo is going to be able to eat Murzakanov's power shots and continue through this fight. And I have a feeling that in close rounds, Paulo Costa is going to get some advantage from his name. Obviously, we've seen this in other fights where it definitely should go one way, and it just goes for the more popular fighter. Paulo almost robbed Sean Strickland with a 49-46 Costa scorecard back when they fought at UFC 302. So it can happen even if the fight isn't close, because that fight wasn't particularly close in my opinion. But I think Paulo is going to make this fight close. I think he's going to be able to eat the shots of Murzakanov, get Murzakanov tired out a little bit, and really pour it on as this fight comes around the bend. And that's why I ultimately have to pick Paulo Costa to win by split decision. I don't think it's going to be easy for him. I don't think that it's going to be, you know, just a cakewalk to take Murzakanov's O. And I could look like a fucking moron come Sunday if Paulo Costa gets highlight reel knocked out, or if Murzakanov just pieces him up to the tune of a unanimous decision. But it's hard to get Paulo Costa out of there, and I think it's going to be even harder to at 205 than it has been with him cutting this frame down to 185. I just think with that level of durability and the proficiency that he's shown in attacking the open side kicking game, which has shown Murzakanov issues in some of his past fights, I have to pick Paulo Costa here. I'm throwing up the fucking Hail Mary Paulo Costa pick. If I'm wrong and I look like a fucking moron, I'm wrong and I look like a fucking moron. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But it's time for the main event. We got Jiri Prochazka taking on Carlos Ulberg to fill the vacant light heavyweight title from Alex Pereira, moving up to heavyweight. The biggest things that jump off here is the high knockdown averages for both men. 1.28 for Ulberg, 0.85 knockdowns for Jiri. I do want to say that against elite competition, notably when he has stepped up to fight, whether it's Volkan Oezdemir, Jan Blachowicz, we have seen that power not tend to carry quite as much into these elite matchups, whether that's because they're able to pressure him, get him off of his base to where he can't really sit down on his shots, whether that's because their entries are more intelligent and they aren't getting clipped by Carlos as they come into the pocket, whatever have you. He is not finishing elite opponents. That's just the fact of the matter. If you want to call 2025 Dominic Reyes elite, then that is one elite win. That is by finish, but other than that, it is decisions. And obviously, Jiri is finishing everybody that he is beating. Whether that is Jamal Hill, former UFC champion, whether that is Khalil Roundtree, former title contender, who he was able to finish quicker than Alex Pereira did. You name it, Jiri is in there with elite, high-caliber guys, and he is getting these knockouts. He is getting that submission win over Glover Teixeira in the 5th round. So, if this fight comes down to the wire and you need to pick somebody to win by finish, it feels like Jiri is the correct decision to make, and we'll go through some of the reasons for that. I'm going to ignore the strike ratios for this fight because, like I said, the output for Ulberg has been lower since he's been facing elite competition too, which makes these numbers not quite as accurate as we might like. So, going over Jiri's tape study, he obviously sucks fucking ass at defending calf kicks. He's not going to do it in this fight. He'll never do it in any of his fights. And his countering tendencies can definitely leave him open to getting high kicked. We saw that when he was waiting to sit down and counter a shot from Alex Pereira in their rematch. And Alex threw up a high kick, caught Jiri off guard, and managed to get the finish. He's unorthodox and reckless. It can get him caught coming into the pocket. But the only person that this has mattered against in the last decade is Alex Pereira. Nobody else has been able to touch his chin hard enough to get him out of the octagon, and anybody who has hurt him has had to deal with his godlike recovery as well, where he is able to eat these massive shots that would put out almost anybody else in the division and still come back to maybe even win that round, win the next exchange, crazy things like that. So it can be difficult to remember, and it can be really easy to think that Jiri is chinny, but he's really not. Alex Pereira just hits like a fucking truck. So when you consider that, and you consider the comparisons that you can make, like when they were both fighting Volkan Oezdemir, Ulberg goes to decision with Oezdemir, and Jiri knocks him out very quickly. It's obviously never safe to go with MMA math, but that'll tell us a little bit about the relative power both of them are bringing in. And I could say this, and Ulberg could find Jiri's chin while Jiri's blitzing in, and he could put him down even quicker than Alex Pereira did either time, and make me look like a moron. That's always possible, but from what the tape shows us, Jiri hits harder than Ulberg. In an exchange where they're swinging dicks, they're going dick for dick, you have to pick Jiri's dick, because it's been shown historically to be the longer dick. And it doesn't matter how fucked you have Jiri. You can have him wobbling out on his feet. If all he is out on his feet and the ref doesn't wave it off and you let him stay in that fight, you are fucked. Jiri could literally get beat for the first 24 minutes straight of this fight, and he is one of the few fighters on the roster where I have full confidence that he can pull off that fluke in the final round and still get the job done. And I would honestly love to see him grapple, but I know he's not going to, because he's just going to want to stand and bang with Carlos. Still, would be really cool if he decided to, because his grappling is much better than Carlos. He could honestly probably even just find the sub, just grappling with Carlos. I know it's not his game, and it would most likely tire him out quicker, but if we're just comparing jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu, massive advantage for Jiri there too. But over to the Ulberg tape study, Kennedy and Nzechukwu changed Ulberg and altered his style completely. He is so much more cautious, so much more on the back foot, so much lower output post Nzechukwu than he is in any fight pre-Nzechukwu. He has also been transformed by his gym into just being a clone of Alex Pereira, because Izzy needed a look for Alex Pereira during training camp. And that could be advantageous in some ways for him, as that means that he has been trying to model his game after the only person who has been able to finish Jiri in the last decade. But he is a shabby imitation of Pereira. He's good on the counter. He has good power in his hands, but he's not knocking out anybody who's actually elite in this division. He is also easy to back up. Jan and Volkan both got him on the back foot regularly throughout the fight. We're able to land low kicks on him. We're able to box with him along the fence. While he's able to get out of these situations and his defensive footwork keeps him safe there, you don't need too many of those situations that Jan and Volkan got him in against Jiri before things can start to go really, really fucking bad for you. And if you're watching back those Jan or those Vulcan fights and you're thinking, what if Jiri was the one throwing shots on him in this instance? You start to realize the problems that Ulberg does have in this matchup. Being so able to be backed up to the cage is a serious problem against Jiri, and not having the ability to finish elite competition could certainly backfire for him in a nasty way while fighting Jiri Prochazka. But he is going to be chopping Jiri's leg all fight. So that's the X factor, I would say, for him. It's not the power in his hands or how sharp his counters are that will win him this fight if he does win. It will be him tearing Jiri's leg up, making it to where Jiri's shots don't have as much sting on them, where Jiri's not able to pursue him as aggressively because he's not as fluid on that lead leg. Make Jiri forced to switch to southpaw instead of able to switch to land his offense when it's opportune for him, to make it to where it's easier to see those setups coming with more looks at the southpaw stance from Jiri, and just in general keep him off of his fluid, spectrum maxing, walk you down with reckless abandon build. Because if Jiri is able to just walk at Ulberg, he will 100% finish him. How I see this fight playing out is that Jiri will be on the outside of Ulberg's jab and be getting caught with left hooks. He'll be getting leg kicked, and he'll be landing shots of his own. But I expect round 1 and 2, even if they're close, to be Ulberg rounds. Much in a similar way to how it went with the Khalil Roundtree fight. I don't expect him to just come out firing on all cylinders like he did against Jamal Hill. He certainly could do that, but I think that Ulberg is a much higher level opponent than Jamal Hill. I think Jamal Hill's a lot plottier than Carlos Ulberg and a lot easier to find and hit. And I think that Jiri's going to need to take some time to figure out and download the data. But come round 3, my pick is Jiri Prochazka to win this fight by TKO. I could see him opportunistically using the grappling when he has Carlos hurt and getting him down to the ground, maybe against the cage, maybe out in the center of the octagon, raining down some shots, some elbows, some body shots from top position. But I see him hurting him on the feet. I see him probably with some sort of weird stance switchy sort of like southpaw left straight attack, finding Carlos and sitting him down or hurting him badly and then swarming him for the finish in the way that Jiri does best. And that's why I have to go with Jiri Prochazka to win this fight. And we are going to make right now a winning method parlay for UFC 327. We're going to pick Jiri Prochazka to beat Carlos Ulberg by knockout. We're going to pick Paulo Costa to beat Azamat Murzakanov by decision. And we are going to pick... Let's find something else fun. I think the value is just too great to not throw a Patricio Pitbull double chance knockout and decision, rather, because the odds of that have still got to be pretty good, even if we're double chancing it. Let me see what it is and tell you people at home. Yeah, KO or decision for Pitbull is plus 275 still, when I feel like he should be the favorite. And he was plus 270 earlier this week. He's like plus 225 right now. Those 3 legs will get you a $5,300 parlay. I'm going to, not 53. Yeah, if you throw $100 on it, it is. I'm going to throw down a little bit on that right now. And that's also boostable on DraftKings with a 30% parlay boost because it is all winning methods. That'll get you $68.90 as the price for that. So that's pretty gorgeous there. And we're going to get something with a little bit less stank on it, since that it seems like a long shot, guys. But honestly, I think that Pitbull line being so inflated is what's doing that. We are going to do a money line shot with those 3 guys as well. We're going to pick Jiri Prochazka, we're going to pick Paulo Costa, and we're gonna pick Patricio Pitbull, and that still goes for $16.92. So I love that as well. So yeah, I honestly feel pretty great about these picks. I'm really excited for these fights. If you guys think I got anything super wrong, go ahead and drop a comment. Let me know why. If you think I got anything super right, let me know about that too. I want to know your guys' most confident pick this weekend. Who are you putting your money on to win at UFC 327? And let's go for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let's please like up and sub this video. Hoping to get back into a more regular streaming schedule here. And thank you guys so much for your view. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy the fights tomorrow, and peace.